I've got my TARDIS. I've come cosplayed as the TARDIS. I've run out of characters.
I mean, I was expecting a Queen Galea. I have to say, or at least a Minotaur.
I did look for a wig or a costume, but I was saying to Jason, I was going to come as this wonderful device. I thought the same thing.
You were going to come as that rather phallically shaped device there, were you? I was
going to have my face on one of the dials.
It's a bit rude, isn't it?
Wouldn't get past the Australian censors.
Hello and welcome to Talking About. This is Series 9, Part 3 of 3. It's the thrilling conclusion, folks. It's the thrilling conclusion. I'm Paul or P-Bal. Don't forget to like us, subscribe to us, notify us, defy us, comment on us, open a different tab, open your browser. I don't know. I've got my hippiest eye makeup on. I'm joined by...
It suits you. Hello, it's James. I forgot who I was then for a second.
And hello, it's Jason.
And I am Queen Galea, the most beautiful queen of all Atlantis. Spoilers. Previously on Doctor Who and the Talking About, we awarded 9 points to the Mutants, so it's currently rock bottom on the season. Followed by Day of the Daleks on 24, Curse of Paladin, beg your pardon, my love.
Oh, James is buzzing halfway through our score recap there.
Especially with that device behind him. Curse of Paladin on 26.5, and our current season leader is the Sea Devils on 30 points. 30 points, folks. Can it be beaten? No, it can be equaled. Is this story going to be the one to do it? This is the Time Monster. Yeah. What was... Oh, no. What's this?
Oh, well, you can't not have a bit of a WH Allen here, can you, eh?
Almost, I've almost got the eye makeup for Kronos, actually. Perhaps I should have done that. Let me loose with an eye pencil. Oh, look, and it's... Oh, you can't see. Oh, there it is. It's signed by Katy. It's not like my Mind of Evil, which is signed to Jon and Katy from John Levine. It's a treasured item.
I'll never forget that happening.
No, neither will I. Was it John Nathan? Did he have a sense of humour failure? Maybe was that? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah. Happy memories. So, who has an introduction for Doctor Who and the Time Monster? And does it begin outside the bounds of this world? Lives Kronos the Chronivore?
No.
Actually, can I just say this? Outside the bounds of this world lives Kronos the Chronivore, a mysterious creature that feeds on time itself. My gosh, I actually want to watch this. Anyway, who's introducing this? Is James introducing this because he's not dressed up as Queen Galea or a Minotaur?
What you can't see is
Is Tom Tit.
Is Tom? Yeah.
Tom Tit. It's rubbish. It's a rubbish name. Tom Tit.
You can't.
I'm sure that's slang for going for a poo, isn't it? I'm going for a Tom Tit.
And you've ruined the punchline from my...
No! Were you going to take it that low this early?
I was.
Look at the shape of the device behind him. He is going to take it that low in this recording. He's already done it.
We've been recording this 7 hours, people. 7 hours, and as a result, this is what you're getting. I'm afraid. I apologise if you're having your breakfast.
So the Master and Unit are back for the season finale, and whilst the Doctor and Jo end up in Atlantis, the Master makes a right Tom Tit out of Benton. That was my introduction. So Jason should be happy because the Unit family are back.
Oh yeah, no, I was happy that the Unit family were back in this one.
Good, it's all right. And we have the Master once again in disguise, who is conducting these experiments on a crystal that, as you quite rightly say, he believes will release Kronos, which he hopes to then use to take over the universe or do the weekly shopping or whatever it is he's trying to do this week. So there we go. That's my intro for 10.
Oh, that is quite a quick intro, that, isn't it? Okay. So, this is okay. So this is another one of those where I think the 6 episodes are probably just a little bit too long. However, you have got some fantastic scenes yet again, where I think at this stage, the character of the Master is absolutely on point. And Roger absolutely, again, excels in this story. And there are some great sequences where, he manages to avoid being recognized for like 2 episodes by wearing the sort of radiation suit or not being in the room or doing what he's doing. But when the story actually hits its stride and they get to Atlantis, you see the Master at his absolute sort of evil, if you like. And I have to say, the Queen does somewhat have the hots for him there, it's fair to say. But no, this is actually it's a really good end to the season. This isn't going to be a classic story. There are a few faults in this one. And I'm afraid Kronos is probably one of those faults, I would say. But on the whole, this again is a typical Jon Pertwee unit kind of story where you're getting mixed up in a kind of some sort of time issue or some sort of the Master on Earth and up to no good. And it feels like a story in 2 parts. So it does feel like sort of 4 parts are set in sort of the Institute, and then you get the sort of last couple of parts when you get to Atlantis. So it fits a typical 6 episode format. Works quite well. I just don't get the name Tom Tit. It just Tom Tit, and they repeat it over and over again in that first couple of scenes. Tom Tit, Tom Tit, Tom Tit. Doesn't make any sense.
Some sort of time issue. I like that as Jon Pertwee typical some sort of time issue. I said very many of his stories, but bit of old Tom Tit from Jason. That was. I think I might have to have a little paddle with Tom Tit written on it. Actually, do you know, bizarrely, talking to Doctor Who's Master and all that sort of, I just found in the book, because I wasn't just reading the book while Jason was talking, there's the moment it says, in his deep, mellow voice, he said, "You are beautiful, O Queen." Galea purred like one of her own cats.
Oh,
Terence Dix, shame on you. Shame on you for that. What do you think you're on, Nadine Dorries? It's funny because Ingrid wanted a couple of tigers, didn't she? She didn't understand that Doctor Who wasn't top budget here. So she wanted 2 tigers on leads and ended up with a black cat. Like, love, you can have a black cat. I think one of the scene guys has got a cat you can bring in if you want to borrow that. And she does just sort of walk around with it looking a bit forlorn because it doesn't quite hit the match. But Ingrid's quite a way on in this, isn't she? She's the end of this. Wanda Moore, I think, is great because we said in the last story there were no other women in it, and we get Wanda, we get Susan Penhallow, we get Ingrid, we get more ladies in this one. Wanda Moore's very assertive, and I think she's sort of, she's got that the women's lib shtick, and I'm using that in the most tenuous form here, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but it's very much been written that she will say, "I don't agree with you being sexist, and I don't agree with you." It feels like, but she does it very well. I think she's a feisty character.
Yeah, she stands up to the Master really early on, doesn't she? When they do the experiment without him, and he comes in, and obviously he's angry because it's basically given him away. I mean, you do question the wisdom that he escapes and then goes basically just down the road from where the Doctor is. It's just like, just go to another planet or do something else. Stop going to countryside, in Britain, which is at least half an hour away from the nearest unit base. But anyway, he reprimands her and she stands her ground, and he does, I mean, he is being his usual suave and, manipulating self, but he does see actually that, he does back down and apologizes to her at that sort of early stage. And she is quite, like you say, quite a strong cat. Even when the Doctor comes in and he constructs that impossible thing, which is just a couple of tea mugs and a spoon and a fork and a cork and
a wine bottle. You'd have thought Jason would have had one of those for us as a prop, wouldn't you?
No, I did my recycling today.
Oh God,
gosh,
no,
must have taken half an hour to empty all those.
That skip's not going to empty itself, is it?
That's just rude.
But even when the Doctor comes in, often the Doctor will sort of take over and take charge, but she is still questioning him and sort of asking what he's doing and sort of making comments as well. So she does play a really good character, strong character. I mean, the brother, is it Stuart, is quite the opposite. He's quite laid back and he sort of just goes along with things. He doesn't really sort of question too much. He bows to his sister's authority. It's quite good in this story.
The character that I found slightly disappointing in the start is that the university professor guy that character name is eluding me, who works out that the Master's not real and he's quite like you're a fraud. As soon as he sort of comes hypnotized by the Master, he becomes a bit stupid. It's really, he goes from being, oh, you're really clever, you've worked out that I'm not who I am and blah blah blah, to being, I'm a bit stupid, and it just was a bit odd that, and then he's killed off and sort of replaced by pretty much the same character, but from Atlantis with a wig. Do you know what I mean? It feels like something's gone on with the scripting there, that they've maybe pushed two characters together or something. It doesn't quite gel, I don't think. And when you see Terry Welsh up a ladder as a cleaner, he's going to fall. He's got up that ladder for a tumble, don't you? There's no way around that.
I mean, there are quite a few scenes where you've got that slow motion running, or you've got, everybody frozen apart from John, who's like, there's some great sort of, I mean, as Jason would say, issues with time.
The issues with time, monster.
And when the Stuart is aged, and then obviously when Benton becomes a baby, and all these sort of side effects of the experiments. But they like you say, they send Unit in quite early on, forcing the Master to hide in the radiation suit. And he comes out and they're like, well, why are you wearing that? And none of us are wearing radiation suits. And he's just like, well, just in case.
He rips the mask off for the cliffhanger. He knows to let himself be revealed for that, doesn't he? He does just keep a secret. It's interesting because the Unit are in this, but they vary in terms of how much they get out of it, don't they? Don't think it's a very strong Brigadier story at all. He gets his traditional, come on, Doctor Who, I've been invited to this to look into it. Do you want to come? No, I don't want to come. I'm doing more interesting things. Or, that kind of shtick. But then he's sort of frozen in time for however many episodes, and he just gets this sort of scene at the end. So Brigadier-wise, I think it's a really poor story for him in a lot of ways. Apart from, I think there's a very strong scene, which slightly can go under the radar, is when he thinks that Captain Yates has been killed, and he's on the radar, Captain Yates goes, and then he calls him Mike, and it's that sort of break of the sort of personal thing, isn't it? That that there's a relationship there that's beyond Captain Yates and Brigadier, that it's Mike, and that's quite a nice piece. But it's a very strong one, I'd say, possibly one of the strongest for John Navina's Benton, isn't it? Actually,
Yeah, he's quite in place throughout this, and he's part of a lot of the action that's just going on inside the institutes. And obviously he gets his famous "I'm going to be shrunk to a baby, and then I'm going to come back at the end, and I'm going to be totally naked while I'm addressing a room that has Doctor Who and the Brigadier in it." But no, I like the fact that Jon gets a chance to shine a little as Sergeant Benton in this.
Yeah, it's like because he sort of outwits the master, doesn't quite, does he? But he works out that it's a fake call. Although you do again have one of those moments where it's a celestial toy maker moment, isn't it? Where all of a sudden the master can just do the Brigadier's voice. Just hold the phone like that. All of a sudden he can just speak exactly like the Brigadier might be speaking like that. It's like, well, that skill hasn't been used very often, has it? I think that was a bit of Tom Tit. But no, I think it's low because Jon has been to get a lot, and also even the humour of the Brigadier in like, well, you coming, no, I'm with the Doctor, who's going to come with me, and then he sort of walks into it as a sort of comedy foil and go, oh, I'm just going on you. So it's nice. I think it's a nice part for him.
But then we get
I was just going to say, I particularly like the scene as well. I know you said about the bit where the Brigadier sort of says Mike, but that whole scene actually where the TARDIS gets blown up and you've got that sort of plane coming in. That's actually quite a serious scene. That really, isn't it?
It's the doodle bug, isn't it? It's the which back in the 70s. A lot of people would have remembered the sound because it's quite a distinctive sound. I mean, if you played it to a bunch of kids today, it'd be like, I wasn't going to say Jason, but someone for people that had been through the war, we're talking second Jason, people that
that sound of a doodle bug haunts me to this day.
It would, for the audience, would have been a significant thing to hear, and you see it on screen. It's a bit difficult because we haven't lived through the war and wouldn't know what it sounded like. But that sound did instill fear into a lot of people during the war. So it is very powerfully used. And again, it's when they have the round heads appear and things like that. I think it's just have a bit of timey-wimey stuff.
Oh, I remember the Roundheads too. Yeah, no, it's nice because Doctor, for a time traveling show, doesn't use time often for a device, does it? So it's quite a clever thing that the Master. I mean, I don't quite. The timey-wimey Tom Tit storyline allows this and doesn't allow this. Okay, but it is quite clever that it's they're sort of actions that took place in that place but previously in history. Yeah. So you have the charging horse, and it's actually quite clever, and it's quite a nice thing to say that they've come back through, and he's using the time element. It's strange because the Atlantean thing is a bit. It sort of goes a bit pantomimey, doesn't it? The sets all look a bit pantomimey when they get to Atlantis. It looks like money's run out, but they've still got to keep pushing on towards the end, doesn't it?
It does, and you're right. It's what I was saying previously. You have this 4-episode, and then you have this 2-episode bolt-on where you're just like, okay, well we've run out of what's happening on Earth. We're going to go to Atlantis now. The Doctor and Jo are chasing after the Master. So this time we've got the excuse that they've managed to lock onto his TARDIS. So, that's how they've managed to escape Earth. And it kind of, I said in the previous recording, they were trying to vary the episodes that they had, one on Earth, one on a different planet. And so they've got this episode where they start on Earth and then they end up in Atlantis. It's not necessarily a different planet, but they're
still on Earth.
But they end up in a different time zone. But you're right. It does veer into No, I wouldn't go so far as to say pantomime, but it is kind of overplayed characters compared to what you've had for the first 4 episodes. Now you get, I mean, we've talked about Ingrid Pitt's performance before. I mean, at least she's not, dying by kicking a rent-a-ghost horse, but she's, Jason's doing his arm movements already.
That is Canine and Company music, though.
What, you mean these?
But here she is doing her sort of Hammer horror, sort of bride of Dracula kind of performance. She's, she just wants to be in power. She's got an elderly husband. She sees the master, and you're absolutely right. She is quite hot for him, and is like, pretty much, I'll do it. He doesn't even have to hypnotize her. She's just like, I'll do it. Because she sees him as strong and capable of taking over.
I struggle a little bit with the Minotaur element of it. So, all of a sudden we get to the end of episode 5, and Joe's locked in this sort of it's on film in this room, and then you've got the sort of Minotaur, and it just doesn't. It gives you a couple of minutes of drama, if you like, but isn't needed. So this is where you come back to that sort of pantomime-y sort of feel to the back end of the story. It's episode 5's a lot better than the beginning of episode 6, and then it crashes through the wall, and you just don't really. That whole thing could have just been expunged out of the script, and we wouldn't have missed it. There was no real reason for it being there.
You got no Dave Prowse then.
I know.
Nothing against Dave. I mean, nice that he was there, but I don't know. It just doesn't add anything to the story, does it?
I think Ingrid's struggling with her lines in a few scenes. I've seen a few moments where she's not quite certain of what she's about to say. I think that might come from being film actory rather than television, maybe. You get the lovely Susan Van Halligan in a sort of thankless part as Lacus, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, as well, when we get to Atlantis, Joe Grant starts talking in a really strange 60s, 70s flower power way where everything's hip and groovy. And it's like, she has never spoken in this way before, has she? It's like someone's given her a new wig and a new personality. I love the joke about Miss Jojo Grant. I like that, this lady Jojo Grant. I like that. It's funny. But all of a sudden, she's all like far out, hip and groovy, man. And it's like, she's never spoken like that. What's going on here? Even more bizarre when you think it's 50% written by Barry Letts, who would know that she didn't speak like that, and scripted by Terence Dix, who again would know that was not the situation.
Perhaps this was just a bit of a fight back against Paul Bernard, who turned up again for this story, and it's well noted that they didn't all get on very well together.
Can't blame him for the wigs, though. Atlantean. I mean, I'd love to think that Queen Galea's busy mates with Professor Zaroff. I mean, that'd be a party and a half, wouldn't it? I mean, they didn't dig the fish people back out to just have a little cameo in the background. They could have been on the Kirby wires when at the end when all the scenery's falling down. They could have just had hey.
Because over the years they've told lots of different versions of the Atlantis story, haven't they?
Well, the season before, Azala said, "Remember Atlantis." It's like, well, no, we're going to do that story next year. We won't say that, even though it's again Roger Sloan and Barry Letts who've written that one. Nobody would care. Nobody cared. Nobody would remember a year on. It's fine.
Yeah, it was Barry that had the fascination about Atlantis, though, wasn't it?
I think he got an interest in the article, hadn't he? There was some kind of scientific thing at the time, was there, about what it could have been or where it could have been, and.
It's weird because of the droughts that are going on at the moment. They've been finding sort of long lost places, and there are still loads of myths around. I mean, obviously Atlantis is supposed to be deep out at sea, but they've been finding like whole lost villages and places because of that. It's really quite interesting that like boats that were sunk in the wars that they suddenly uncovered.
Episode 4 of The Smugglers, just in a tin. But
that's what's going to happen, isn't it? On a riverbed somewhere.
Episode 2 of the Space Pirates will be found at pristine film quality. And like, oh, good, we found a Doctor Who episode, and it's the Space Pirates Part 2. We are much blessed.
God.
I was going to say, this is probably one of the most toy-merched episodes that I can think of as well, because Character Options did a B&M set, didn't they, where you got Doctor Who, Joe, and the Master, but they'd previously done the Master and his little sort of TARDIS. Yeah. So, I mean, gutted that we haven't got a Queen Galea figure. I don't know what's with them. I'm sure we could take the sculpt of a head off a Donna Noble and the body of a Perry or something and turn it into a Queen Galea for us. Charge us all 25 quid to buy it again. We don't mind.
We could have 3 different versions of her.
Yeah. You could, I mean, gosh, if they put her into the white suit, you could then have an Ingrid Pitt special pack, and I could put it with my Silurians. I'm actually quite sold on that. With authentic karate motion.
No,
not canine, Jason.
Okay.
We get this whole sort of extended sequence of being inside each other's TARDISes as well, where it's quite. I mean, you get your cliffhanger ending, don't you? When sort of the Master says, "Oh, I've ditched. I've got rid of the Doctor. So bye, Joe. I'm sending you off." And you get this sort of like the TARDIS spinning off effect, which is all very neatly resolved in the beginning of the next episode, where the Doctor comes through, through the intercom and says, "Joe, I'm still here. Press a button." It's like, oh, there I am.
Shades of Curse of Fatal Death here in this episode, isn't there?
That's what I think.
The whole of episode 4 is literally set in the TARDIS, and they're talking back and forth to each other. I must admit, I still laugh even now when he reverses the thing and John's talking in reverse. I do find that a little bit amusing, but it's so obviously again just a little bit of additional padding to get you through the whole story here, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's funny because I did watch the Curse of Fatal Death recently, and I did think at one point the Master was going to go, "I can still hear you," and that sort of is that kind of thing where the Doctor's like, "Oh, we need to do this," and he's like,
it gave them the chance to show off the new TARDIS interior, of course.
Yeah,
it's quite something to spend that much and then junk it, isn't it? Because
it was. They called it. Was it the washing bowl TARDIS? Because they look like. Yeah,
and I find it unusual that the Master's is exactly the same. He's changed his interior at the same time.
It's fashion. It's fashion, isn't it? You get the magazines. He's probably seen it on Gallifrey and TikTok that is the design for a console room right then. Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
But you're right; it's a lot for one story, essentially, isn't it? They ditch it.
They only ditch it because it gets so badly damaged between seasons because it's not exactly the most practical set anymore, and then they're forced into having a redesign. But in many respects, it was the best thing that could have happened because, whilst it's a novelty, that's all it is for me, is a novelty. And when you get back to the 3 Doctors and you're back to that sort of classic console room with the sort of clean roundels in there, you know that they made one hell of a mistake in what they did at the back end of the season. And I admit, the old set was looking a bit ropey. When you saw it earlier in the season, the photographic blow-up wall just really wasn't working anymore in color. So, that was never going to happen. But yeah, it was a wrong turn. Very glad that they somehow didn't end up with it in the end.
I mean, Kronos, the all-destroying eater of time, the manifestations are a guy in a white jumpsuit with bird wings and a lady with a lot of eye makeup on CSO. And I'm not sure either of them pay off particularly well, do they?
For me, I really do think that they could go back, and if they were going to redo this episode, is just have Kate Bush as Kronos, just in in a white flowing dress, just in the background flapping her arms. Because whenever I watch this, that's what I think of. I think of a Kate Bush video.
That'd be the only thing that could make it worse, isn't it?
Oh no! Oh, I forgot you don't like Kate Bush. But it just, I just think it is quite. I mean, I actually quite. The bit at the end where the two TARDISes are supposedly out of time after they've tried to time ram each other, and you just see her eyes. I quite like that bit, but I think the other shots with the, like you say, with the flapping white bird, I'm not entirely. Jason's flapping his bingo wings now. Look.
I am definitely not having the camera on me doing that.
I don't necessarily think it works as an overall look. I mean, I've seen sort of stills of the faceplate and things like that. Probably could have been done better, but
we also get that just prior to her appearing, we also get a scene which is very similar to the scene we get in The Three Doctors, where Joe presumes they're dead and they've gone to heaven. It seems to be like a sort of running theme, doesn't it, over the two stories? It's not quite Monster of Peladon where Sarah thinks that Doctor Who is dead every sort of 13 minutes. But it's one of those scenes, isn't it? It's like, no, Joe, we're not in heaven.
But these are directorial decisions, though, aren't they? And Paul Bernard, we've talked about him this season, where he just didn't understand how to shoot Daleks, how to give you that sort of real feel of the action that was going on in the scenes. And this is again a great point. He just doesn't know what to do with the Kronos monster. So, stick it on Kirby wires and fly it back and forth and make it flap its wings and do all the things it did. But there is absolutely nothing menacing about it whatsoever. And, okay, it's not the best of costumes, but there are other things a director could have done with that to give you that little bit more menace. And the CSO scene, it's a nice scene, but it doesn't work because Joe's dress is the same color as the background on the CSO and she virtually disappears. But I just think directorially, he misses a beat here again and doesn't nail the monster of the week.
He misses lots of notes. I mean, at the end bit where everyone was laid dead in the ruins of Atlantis and Ingrid Pitt stood up with her head bowed, and you'd show some of that. You'd go across the ruins and you'd have a shot of her in close. Then you'd have the lot. It doesn't. I know there's constraints within a studio and all that sort of stuff, and I appreciate that. It just feels that even the film sequences, and the film sequences are usually the money shots, aren't they? Where the director can go, actually, this is how this is going to look. It's going to be gorgeous. Even the film sequences are a bit not amateur, might be unkind, a bit pedestrian, which is much kinder.
They are pedestrian, and again, it's another missed opportunity because again, I've referenced it already. But again, how would you film the Minotaur scenes? Okay, I've been a little critical of the costume here, but again, as a director, there are ways and means of doing things on set that means that you can lower the lighting or just go into close-ups or do tight shots or whatever it might well be. So for me, Paul Bernard as a director on the showing of this season, he's not he's not getting Doctor Who somewhere along the line.
A safe pair of hands, as I
wouldn't even call him a safe pair of hands, if I'm honest with you. I'd call him a bit of a dodgy pair of hands.
Doesn't get his frontier in good shape, does he? That's obviously what he's not coming back, I'm guessing. But what I would say, because I suppose I don't know whether we've sounded fairly miserable on this. I don't dislike the Time Monster.
No,
I don't think it's not my favorite. It's not one that I rush to put on, but it's fun enough. I think, if that makes sense. There's lots of bits that keep it going and keep the interest. And you've got Roger, you've got Katie. There's enough. Unlike previous stories, Mutants, where it just felt like it had stopped halfway through the first episode. This, whilst it rambles a little bit and it goes into sort of strange kind of, let's just keep this going, we've got 6 weeks. I never watching it, I never felt at any point I was like, I've had enough of this now, it's rubbish, I can't watch anymore. It's like, this is all right, I don't mind it. It's quite fun in some places.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on this, because I think because you've got that construction of the 4 and the 2, it doesn't feel like it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is stretched in parts. Let's be perfectly honest. Particularly in the whole sort of TARDIS sequences in episode 4, but it works because it takes the narrative to a different location. However we think about it, it takes it off to the different location, and then it gives it almost a little bit of a little bit of a lift. But it's, yeah, right. I'm certainly not getting down and heavy on this story. I think this is a reasonable watch, and it's not one that offends. Nowhere near as offensive as the Mutants, that's for sure.
I think that the unlike the last story, there's plenty of Doctor and Joe scenes in this, and in the beginning where they're in the car and she's criticizing his driving and saying you're going too fast, and he zooms off. Even later on, when the Doctor says, there's only one way to stop the Master, and that's to time ram him, and she's like, okay, do it. She has got to the point where she is like, I accept that this might be the only way to stop him. So I think those scenes are great. And like you say, with Roger's Master, whenever he's with John, those scenes always go. And I think that although Ingrid is not necessarily a brilliant actress, the way that she pursues the Master, the sort of the relationship between the two of them, you could imagine. In these early series, we don't really see either the Doctor or the Master have a love interest particularly, but this is probably one of the strongest contenders for an early Master love interest, because they were both as power hungry as each other. There are lots of different elements about this story that just make it fun. It does, for me, it does feel like a season finale. It's kind of like, we've brought everyone back. We've got a bit of a Tom Tit story, but we're going to have fun. We're going to do X, Y, Z. Then we're going to go off to Atlantis. We're going to have a Minotaur. We're going to have Ingrid Pitt with her boobs all up in her face and that kind of thing, and we're just going to go for it. And I think great, especially on the back of the previous story. It's like we bounce back up again.
It's a shame that there aren't many scenes with Ingrid and John, because they're great in House of Drip Bloods. It's a shame there's not, even if there'd have been a bit of Queen Galea maybe flirting with Doctor Who. Imagine if Ingrid Pitt had been the Marshal in the Mutants.
Oh.
Might have improved it.
Let's push my score up to a 3 for the Mutants. Just that thought.
I would have done Beryl Reid.
You'd put the meddling monk in it, made it a telesnap recon, and given it a 10. Hey!
It's true. It's true.
What's been happening? Sorry. It's all getting too much now. It's all getting too much. Yes, I think it's a fun endeavor. It's not hilarious fun, but it is a nice. Also, the scene that we haven't mentioned, I'd like the Daisy scene. That's quite sweet. The Doctor's speech about being on the hill and things aren't as bad as they seem and all that sort of thing. That's very nice.
Again, that's another lovely Katie John scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
In amongst everything else.
And he convinces when he does scenes like that as well. It's a nice sort of moment where he can convince, I think.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Day of the Daleks again, isn't it? Because you've got the sort of they're locked in the cellar there in towards the end of the story, and they're having that sort of chat. And it's moments like that you really do see the genuine affection between the two of them, not just as Doctor and Joe, but as Katy and Jon. It comes across. And I think that there's a genuine warmth there between the two characters.
But as we just have said about the time ramp thing, Joe's like, let's do it. I'll sacrifice myself. I'll pull the lever on it. Given that we've just seen Tegan and Perry, I couldn't imagine either of them doing that. And I don't know whether, that says anything about anything, but in terms of Doctor Who having an assistant or companion, whatever we're calling it, should be 100% into this. It should be 100% invested in the kind of the adventure or the spirit of the adventure. And it's interesting because you don't appreciate, I honestly don't think you can appreciate how good some pairings are until you watch like we have, if that makes sense. I think
the relationship between the Doctor and Joe is like mentor at the beginning. At the beginning he doesn't even like her. She sort of comes in and he's like, "No, I don't want another assistant like that." But their relationship grows and they become really solid friends. She is prepared to sort of sacrifice herself for him, in a number of stories. And it is a natural progression that really makes you love that combination. Whereas we've talked about some of the companions where actually you never see that connection with the Doctor.
Indeed. And it's the trip of a lifetime. If you're somebody from Earth, to get to travel with somebody as fantastic as the Doctor, it is the trip of the life. I'm not using the sort of modern sort of, Rose Doctor kind of analogy here, but it is a privilege. I take up what you just said there, James, because actually you go back to Terror of the Autons and she comes in and she's clumsy and doesn't understand the experiment and ruins it. At the beginning of this story, they've clicked so well that she understands what so he's building the rather phallically shaped machine that you have behind you there, and she can talk about what the purpose of the machine is. So in the course of the 2 seasons, we've gone from, you're right, absolute beginner to I'm really settled in this. I'm really, on the same wavelength as the Doctor. I am, I'm in this. I love this. And she had the choice in Curse of Peladon to walk away and stay on Peladon. She didn't, because this is part of that relationship, and it genuinely shines through. And it does make, Jon and Katy's sort of on-screen relationship something so special for us, even after all these years. And a lot of modern storytelling could look back at this and take some cues from this, I think.
You get the future echo, don't you, of Joe reading a newspaper article and Doctor Who not listening to what she's read, because you then get the Green Death where she's reading the article and you say, you never listen to a word I say. And you can see that it's quite sweet. You think, actually, Joe must come in the morning with the newspaper, go through the articles. He doesn't listen, he does listen, whichever way it is. But that's their little routine. And again, it's a sort of, it's character, isn't it? And it's a believability, and it's quite a sweet part of the relationship.
I know we've talked about the Green Death already, but I love the fact that the Green Death is basically in one story with how the relationship developed with the Doctor is how it develops with Stuart, because she walks in and she blunders into the experiment and ruins it. And it's that initial Stuart scene is the same as the one at the beginning of the Terror of the Autons, but you get the developing relationship over one story rather than 3 seasons. But I love the way that is done, and I struggle to find many examples of companion relationships that evolve in such a natural way, but also have a natural conclusion in that way that so neatly sums everything up.
Although when Janet Fielding comes to watch this for the season box set behind the sofa, she can complain that Katie's got 2 costumes in the one story and that she did a story with Ingrid Pitt too. Put that out there as my prediction. Just a little hint on the wind that might be what she says. I don't know. Maybe all under a blanket. Do we have any exciting or otherwise facts on Doctor Who?
Yeah. So there was a scene that was cut where they explained, or the Doctor explained, how Joe could understand ancient Atlantean language. So, you know, in more modern Who, they talk about the TARDIS being telepathic. There was a scene that was supposed to be where the Doctor explained that he was going to get the TARDIS to translate language for her, but that was cut out of it. There's another scene where the Doctor, you hear his subconscious thoughts, and one of them's a woman. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but one of his subconscious thoughts is a female voice. All those people going, "Not my daughter." But yeah, there we go. The baby. This is really sad. The baby that played Baby Benton died before it was 1 year old. Hate to bring the tone.
Do we know if that's an actual fact? 'Cause I think that's one of John's stories, but I don't know whether it's an actual fact.
From John himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's from John. That's what I'm saying. I think John Levine tells this as a story, but there has been some speculation as to whether that's entirely true.
In the comments, if you know where Baby Benton is, we'll get him signed up for a phantom signing.
Imagine some poor 50-year-old guy having to sign pictures of a baby. We'd do it. We would do it. I'm not going to lie. We would do it. So yeah,
And put him on the table next to John.
One of the stuntmen, Greg Powell, was badly injured when he fell off a horse in the scenes where the Master was bringing the Roundheads and things back. And yeah, Robert, what's his name? Robert Sloan. I can't read my own handwriting. Didn't like the way Kronos looked. So I know we've talked about Kronos, but didn't like the way that it was envisaged on screen. But there we go.
You mean Barry?
Barry.
50-50. 50-50.
It's almost Coco time in the care home. Do we have any scores on Doctor Who and the Time Monster? Come on, folks. This is the season finale. These scores are going to make or break our top 5 here.
Wow, that is fair. Shall I go first, Jason? Then you can add or subtract 0.5 accordingly.
To be honest, I'm more than happy for you to go first, but I may or may not add 0.5 or take it away. Who knows? I don't know till I get there. I'm just gonna roll with this when I get to my score.
It's just words. It's literally just words. What a load of Tom Tit, Jason.
Tom Tit.
Well, it's not perfect, but it does have unit in it, so I scored. No. No, do you know what? I actually do like this story. I think it's just fun. It's not, I mean, please don't concentrate too much on it because it really doesn't bear much scrutiny at points. But I think it is a bit of as I say, a season finale. They've got unit in, they've got the Master in, they've got a bit of timey-wimey stuff. And I think some of it works, some of it doesn't. But I think, it's the season finale, and I think they've ended it on a reasonable story. So I actually scored it 7.
So It's a very fair score. Okay, coming to me. We've had our dip in the season with the mutants. And whilst we may not be getting back to the giddy heights of the first 3 stories, this certainly isn't the worst story I've ever seen by a long way. And I agree with a lot of what James said. Okay, let's not look too closely at it. There's some padding here and there. The monster isn't necessarily that well executed, but you can't hold it against a really, I think, a really solid sort of Jon Pertwee, Katy Manning unit, all the regulars there, and a redesigned TARDIS, the console room, even though I didn't necessarily like it, but it's a season ender and it works reasonably well. So I was actually going to score exactly the same as James, and I'm going to continue to score exactly the same as James. And I am going in there with a 7 for the Time Monster.
Gosh, the interesting thing that I take from that, just to go on the facts here, is that you both gave Day of the Daleks 8, so you're not differentiating the Time Monster terribly definitively from the Day of the Daleks.
Day of the Daleks is better.
Yeah.
I just remember One Oak Queen, who's dropped his rainbow flag this week, was saying that Day of the Daleks is like one of his all-time favourites, and it's like, well, anyway, it's fine. We all, and I'm not picking on anyone's score. It's just I'm slightly surprised that we're only 1 point out on Day of the Daleks, having said how great Day of the Daleks was and how all right Time Monster is. Just saying, folks.
I think the point off for me, I mean, if you want to look at the points difference here, Day of the Daleks, it's a Paul Bernard direction at the end of the day, and that would have affected my score at that stage. However, okay, this is a little over long at 6, but it's still a pretty good story, and it's not the worst. It's not the worst example. Just look at the mutants. That'll give you a really good clue as to what the worst example is, really, for me.
Is it a pretty good story, though? Is it? Essentially, the Master's fiddling with his Tom Tit and then goes to Atlantis. I don't. Is it a good story?
There is enough to interest me. I'll score it from a personal perspective, and there is enough to interest me in this story.
All I'm saying is that someone said that Day of the Daleks is one of their go-to all-time favourites.
I can quote you lines out of it. I can quote you all sorts out of it.
But only 1 point difference between that and the Time Monster. That is all I'm saying. Is it's a slightly strange place to be at.
If I'd scored it an 8 alongside Day of the Daleks, then I would be happy to be challenged. But I've scored it a 7, which is a lower score.
I don't care if you're happy or unhappy to be challenged. If I want to challenge you, babes, I'll challenge you.
And you are welcome to do so.
Well, 1 point difference between that and that. I like to differentiate my scores between whether I like the stories or not. And so as a result, I can remember having this as a special tin set with the Colony in Space for Christmas. What a beautiful pairing that was. I think Time Monsters, it's all right. It's a fairly average thing, so I gave it 5. Bam. Jason's having a very sulky drink on his pint now. He's like,
No, I'm not sulking. I'm perfectly comfortable with the 7 I've given it.
Any minute now, the Tinky Winky bag's going to come up. I can see it.
He'll be in a string vest because no one wants to see the Tinky Winky. That's why it's got the string vest on.
No one wants to see his Dipsy and his Lala either.
And don't get me started on Poe.
He sound a Poe. Anyway, enough of this Tom Tittery. Season 9 has been devoured like Kronos and Time. Great story. It's a great story. Anyway.
James scored it a 7. Why are you not criticising James?
James didn't say the Day of the Daleks was like one of his favourite stories. He didn't say, I know all the words to this because it's such a favourite of mine. He didn't say that. Hence why I asked you about it. Because I thought you don't know the script for the Time Monster off by heart, and you didn't say it was as good, so I thought there might be a more disparate score. So wind your neck in, love. Wind your neck in.
Right, if the time meddler had turned up, I would have given it a 10.
Oh, no, don't start that again.
Wait for the Telesnap recon. Anyway, the final votes are in on Doctor Who Season 9, and in 5th place, it is the Mutants on 9 points.
Very well deserved, that.
Poor Mutts. Poor Mutts.
On 4th place, on 19 points, it's Doctor Who and the Time Monster.
It's the right position.
It's got a great script. I like the script for it. In 3rd place on 24 points is Doctor Who and the Day of the Daleks. In 2nd place on 26.5 is The Curse of Peladon, which means our winner with 30 points is the Sea Devils.
Yay!
Yeah, thank you. Bloody hell, that was a delay, wasn't it?
Yay, I'm all over that as well. I like that. That's a good season winner.
Good. Well, we all gave it 10, so we all agree. Right. Well, thank you very much. Don't forget, you can like us, you can subscribe to us, you can notify us, you can, I don't know, you can do a lot of things on YouTube, I think. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Pleasure.
A pleasure as always.
Kronos is about to swing into Jason's apartment. It's so badly realised I give it 10. Don't forget, we'll be back next week with more, so see you then.